try to move along here. I guess this thing's on. Okay. I would, for a verse, I'm going to read uh, Luke 9, verse 36, uh, kind of for the text, not necessarily, but part of it. Luke 9:36. Oh, I need to get the right one. Luke 9:36, it says that, well, the setting, even before that, was the Mount of Transfiguration, and at the end of that, uh, Moses and Elias appeared, and then they left, and Peter, of course, his famous saying about the tabernacles. And then a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they feared as they entered into the cloud. And verse 35 and 36, and there came a voice out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." And when the voice was past, Jesus was found alone. And the voice was past, Jesus was found alone. And so the title of the message is Alone But Not Lonely. Alone But Not Lonely. And maybe a little bit of background. On why that. December the 30th of 22, Betty Jane's, her mom passed away, and of course we know with funerals, with visitation, funeral and all that, it's always exhausting. And it was on the way home that this phrase popped in my mind. And I thought immediately of her dad. Was not just alone, but he was also experiencing loneliness. And so I'm not I'm not necessarily targeting anyone. I mean, it's something that we face. Alone but not lonely. And so as we go through this, maybe we can come to a little bit more of an understanding. And so I divided these in two parts. Talk about loneliness first, and then also alone, the benefits of being alone. But loneliness, the definition it gives is just, it's a loss of connection. When we think of loneliness, it's a loss of connection, or there could be a sadness because of a loss, and that could be a companion, even like her dad, a companion of 60-some years is gone. And so you experience that loss. Loneliness is pretty much affects everyone. There's sometime in our life, we're going to experience that. No one is exempt. It seems to be part of life. Anyone in some kind of relationship will at times experience loneliness. And we know that a person can be in a crowd and feel lonely. We know that. But also we know that a person can be alone and not feel lonely. So there's both of those. Loneliness is not a disease. Okay? Loneliness is not a disease. It is a state of being, which means that my, my situation as far as loneliness can change, that it can be overcome, even though it's hard and it's tough at times. So loneliness is not a disease. Loneliness, though, can change, if we're not careful, can change into discouragement if it continues to go on. Can become discouragement. We can experience people despair, hopelessness, and and even though that people experience loneliness, we do not want to loneliness to translate it into these kind of things. We know that despair, discouragement, depression, those are disease. That is a disease, and that is very hard to overcome. Nobody ever intends to become lonely. I mean, that's just the way it is. We do not intend, we do not choose to become lonely. But we know that things change, even like for Dad, things change. Things are out of our control at times. It could be loss of a companion. It could be loss of a friend. It could be a financial loss that would prompt loneliness. There's a host of other things, and of course, older people, it affects older people probably more than anyone, and that's why I thought about this, and even since that time, I've not been able to get this out of my mind, and so that's what prompted me to study this. I was actually going to share it the last time, which was December the 24th, but I felt like I should have a little bit more something around Christmas, so I put this one off till now. But older people have more of a tendency to experience loneliness, and the thoughts come, does anyone see, does anyone care? And what happens sometimes, there's a pattern of negative thoughts, and those are really hard to break. Negativity becomes part of our life, and it becomes hard to overcome. People deal with loneliness in many different ways, and one of the ways is just noise. People deal with noise, and that could be music, it could be the TV, it could be all kinds of things. And I just remember years ago when I was doing lawn care, and I did a lot of lawn care for a lot of older people, and it was interesting that times I was in their house, I mean, I would knock on the door and they'd say, "Come on in and I'll go get you a check," And there was noise going on, and I knew they weren't listening. I knew that. The TV was going, and they weren't watching it. They were working. It was the noise. It was the noise that they had to overcome this idea of loneliness. We can even listen to sermons to help with our loneliness, and people probably do that. There's all kinds of different relationships that experience loneliness. There's marriages, and I would probably be lying if I'd say it doesn't happen. It does. In our families, in our friends, even in business. There's times when you feel loneliness. Two things in our marriages. There could probably be more things. One of them is that a spouse could feel lonely because, one, I do not feel my needs are being taken care of. Or the other one, number two, could be the need to be understood, and that is different than understanding. The need to be understood, and there seems to be in everyone, even whatever relationship, that people want to be understood. What is it about that person? Well, what makes them tick, and all that sort of things. So those are two things. We know that we've heard that opposites attract. Well, the thing about it is opposites also rub. So So there you have it, you know, and when there's a rubbing, there's a tendency of a disconnection, of pulling away, and so therefore loneliness is the result. One man told me that the very things that attracted me to his wife now irritate me. Like, well, I guess, you know, it's what you make out of it. But loneliness can be part of a marriage. Uh, it can be part of a family. And I appreciate Kenna's thoughts on children. And it could be that a child or two becomes lonely because of their needs, and the attention is not given, uh, or maybe more attention is given to them than the rest of them. Uh, so they feel lonely. Or it could be the other extreme where a child could feel that they're a target in the family, and what they do is, it doesn't matter. It's always their fault, and that produces loneliness. They start to pull away, and because they feel that they are a target. The best of our intentions, even as parents, doesn't always go right, and we know that. The best of our intentions does not always go right. In even all of our relationships, whether it's friends, family, marriage, whatever, the one thing that needs to happen is that unless we are intentional in discovering what the needs are, which probably most of the time we know what the needs are, and coming to an understanding of how to meet those needs, there will be periods of loneliness. That's just the way it is. But we need to be, and what happens sometimes is that we're not intentional, and we just, and there that I've seen families where things that should have been talked about when their children were at home never were, and once they were gone, and then how do you deal with this? So we need to be intentional in taking care of needs, coming to an understanding of how to take care of those needs. So we eliminate, at least in part, the periods of loneliness. What contributes to loneliness? And even as I thought of her dad, I know this is geared a little bit more towards older people, but I know it affects young people as well. Some of the things that I thought about as far as contributing to loneliness is age. We get older, and we just can't, older people just cannot, even like our dad, just cannot do the things that he used to do. And so physical labor, whatever, he just can't because of his age. And so that's one of the hindrances of, or what contributes to loneliness. Another one is energy. And we all know that the older we get, the less energy we have. I mean, I know that's a fact. We need to rest more as far as older people, and we just don't have the energy. Number 3 is mental capacity, and how many times that I've heard, you know, wow, I just can't remember. I just can't remember what their names is, or I can't remember what happened, whatever. It's that sort of thing also. And there's a lot of things that are out there that are supposed to keep our minds sharp, and there's a lot of things that people are doing. But that is one of the things. Mental capacity deteriorates as we get older, and it can contribute to loneliness. Another one is health issues. That's a fact of life. They're all different for all of us. Even last Tuesday, I was at Mountain Home, and some of you knew that I got spots on the side of my face, and I got one on my ear. That's cancerous. And so Tuesday, I was in Mountain Home, and they cut from here by my eye back to my sideburn, and dug around and dug around and dug around in there, and until they figured they got it all. But I still have to do my ear, and that's not till next month. But I have that, and somebody else has something greater, health issues. It's just part of life. We never know. We don't know. And I'm just grateful that even for the benefit of Raymond, that we can stick together and we can be together for his cause. But health becomes more precious the older that we get. Another one is limitation of activities. I mean, the older we get, just like our dad, there's activities we can't do, and so that when you think of the limit of activities of what a person can do, has a way of contributing to loneliness. Uh, People say the older you get, you need hobbies. Maybe that's true. I'm not sure what my hobby is. Maybe I need to worry about that. But lack of hobbies or a lack of interest in things, whatever, uh, contributes to loneliness. Well, what about younger people? And I'm impressed in the many young people um, involved in all kinds of different ministries. I mean, you take CAM and overseas, whatever, and the contributions that they're making, uh, that's impressive, and I love that. Uh, but for older people, loneliness is something that they deal with, is real. It's something that we deal with. Someone has said loneliness should be our friend and not our enemy. Uh, so I guess if it is, we make it our friend. It means that I use it to my advantage, which means that I'll be looking for things to do to uh, keep loneliness away. Should be our friend and not our enemy. It takes a new way of thinking uh, if we think like that. Someone has said loneliness is an opportunity to connect with God in our feelings, and often it is a feeling. Loneliness is a feeling, but it can become a way of life for us, and sadly, it is a way of life for some people, and don't know what to do to overcome it. As loneliness affects us, it also behooves us that we as a church need to be aware of that. And I know that there's people who have the gift of discerning the behaviors of people, and when those behaviors change, and they do change, is that what's happening in that person's life, and being able to help a person like that through those times. Next couple of minutes, I want to just talk about being alone. And there's quite a few scriptures. There's one in Matthew 6, verse 6, that Jesus was, of course, our big example of being alone. In the Beatitudes, he says in Matthew chapter 6, it says, when you pray, enter into your closet and shut the door. That means being alone. No distractions. You shut the door, so there's no distractions. And being alone. Pray to thy Father which is in secret, and he, the Father which seeth in secret, which shall reward thee openly. In Luke chapter 9, verse 18, it says that it came to pass as he was alone, talking about Jesus, praying, his disciples were with him, and he asked them, saying, whom say the people that I am? So Jesus, and there's other scriptures that Jesus advocates the need for being alone. Being alone is not something that needs to be dreaded. It's not something to be dreaded. It's not something to be scared about. I know there's a lot of people who are not comfortable in being alone. They like activity. They like things going because they don't like to be alone. We need to learn to become comfortable being alone. For some, it's much easier than for others. But I think just the very example of Jesus, we need to become comfortable in being alone. A couple of examples of people who felt alone. Of course, Adam, number one, Adam. God said, no, it's not long. It's not good for you to be alone. So God took care of that. Adam was not alone. We think of Elijah, and we all know the story of the big event of the altar of Baal and what happened there. Well, what did Elijah do after that? Just because Jezebel sent a note to him and said, tomorrow your life is going to be like them, and he ran. And so he ended up in a cave. And God asked him, what are you doing there? He said, well, my life is not worth anything. I'm all alone. There's nobody like me. And God said, no. I have 7,000 men in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal and who have not kissed his face. But Elijah thought he was very much alone. David was another person who felt very much alone at times. He said in Psalms 102:7, I watch and am as a sparrow alone on the housetop. There's times when David felt very alone. And when he was running from Saul, he had 400 men with him, but they were not the ones that were hunted. David was the one that was hunted. And he felt very alone, even though there's a lot of men with him. He felt alone. He said in Psalm 142, I looked on my right hand and beheld, there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. That was David. Job was another one. He said, all my inward friends abhorred me, and they whom I loved are turned against me. And we know the story of Job. His wife even turned against him. He felt very much alone. Paul, in 2 Timothy 4:16, he says, at my first answer, no man stood with me, but all men forsook me. I pray God that it may not be laid to their charge. Even Paul at a time felt very alone. The one thing about all these examples of people, of men feeling alone, was that being alone did not characterize their life. It did not dictate how they lived their life. It changed for them, and so it was not something that they wallowed in. It did not characterize their life. Being alone, praying and meditating, remembering what God has done in our lives, is sometimes the best way to grow, to experience growth, and to receive inspiration for our lives is just spending time alone and to see where we're at. Taking time to be alone is the best way to think through a problem, through a situation that we might be facing. How do I deal with this? What do I do? Being alone is a way to stay focused on what we feel needs to happen. Sometimes I wonder if we don't feel alone at times because we are not where God wants us. And we think of Elijah. He was in that cave. God said, that's not where I want you. That's not where you need to be. And he felt alone. And God said, you need to go back. You need to go back and you need to take care of business in Israel. But I wondered sometimes if when we feel alone, we are not where the Lord wants us to be. So what is the secret of being alone, but we're not lonely? The secret is that the presence of God becomes such a reality that I do not feel alone. And I know that probably most of us have experienced interaction with older people that we were challenged because that's what it seemed their life to be. That I know that I've heard people say when they went and visited an older person, whether it's a widower or a widow, that they would say we were more encouraged by being there than they probably were from us being there. And all because of the reality of the presence of God is the way that they deal with loneliness and being alone. It's not something we choose, but sometimes because of life, the way life is dealt to us, we are in those situations. And so, God is with us needs to become a reality. We don't think ourselves then as being alone because God is with us. A verse I like to read, Psalm 16:8, that I'd like to read in closing. It says, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. And if we can remember that as we face things in life, especially in things of feeling alone at times and lonely, that we can remember that verse, that God is with me, is at my right hand. Give the time back to Junior.
Thank you, Freeman.